The sun rose over the small, sleepy town of Willow Creek, casting a golden glow over the fields that stretched endlessly in every direction. Eleanor Thompson, a woman in her late 40s with calloused hands and a weathered face, stood on the porch of her modest farmhouse. She wiped her hands on her apron, leaving streaks of dirt across the fabric. The air smelled of fresh hay and earth, a scent she had grown to love over the years. Her life was simple, tending to the farm, feeding the chickens, and ensuring her son, Jacob, got to school on time. But today, something felt different. Jacob, a wiry teenager with a mop of unruly hair, bounded down the stairs, his backpack slung over one shoulder. "Mom, I don't want to go to school today," he muttered, avoiding her gaze. Eleanor sighed, leaning against the doorframe. "Jacob, you know how important it is to finish your education. Your father would have wanted that for you." The mention of his father silenced him. It had been 5 years since the accident, a tractor malfunction that claimed her husband's life. Since then, Eleanor had shouldered the burden of running the farm alone, but she never let it show. To Jacob, she was a pillar of strength, unshakable and resilient. Yet beneath the surface, she felt the weight of loneliness pressing down on her. At school, Jacob often found himself the target of ridicule. His worn-out clothes and quiet demeanor made him an easy mark for the bullies, particularly Mark Harris, the star quarterback with a penchant for cruelty. Mark's favorite pastime was mocking Jacob's mother, calling her the farmer who can't count. Today, however, he had something new planned. "Hey, farmer boy," Mark called out as Jacob entered the classroom. "I heard your mum thinks she's smarter than everyone else. Maybe she should come to class and prove it." The other students laughed, but Jacob clenched his fists, his face burning with shame. He hated Mark, but more than that, he hated feeling powerless. Unbeknownst to Jacob, Mark's taunts had reached the ears of Mrs. Peterson, the calculus teacher. A stern woman in her 60s, with sharp eyes and a no-nonsense attitude, she decided to take matters into her own hands. After class, she approached Jacob. "Your mother works hard, doesn't she?" she asked gently. Jacob nodded, unsure where this was going. "Tell her I'd like to see her tomorrow. We have an opportunity for her." That evening, Eleanor sat at the kitchen table, her hands wrapped around a steaming mug of tea. Jacob hesitated before breaking the news. "Mom, Mrs. Peterson wants you to come to school tomorrow. She said something about solving calculus problems." Eleanor blinked, setting her mug down. "Calculus? Me? That's absurd." But deep down, a spark of curiosity ignited. Eleanor had always been good with numbers, though she rarely spoke of it. As a child, she excelled in math, but life on the farm left little room for academic pursuits. Still, the idea of walking into a classroom full of teenagers and solving equations seemed laughable, yet there was something in Jacob's voice, a mix of hope and desperation, that tugged at her heart. The next morning, Eleanor arrived at the school, her boots clicking against the polished floors. Whispers followed her as she entered the classroom. Mrs. Peterson greeted her warmly, though her expression betrayed a hint of mischief. "Mrs. Thompson, thank you for coming. Let's see if you're as clever as they say." Eleanor took a seat at the front of the class, her heart pounding. Mrs. Peterson wrote a complex equation on the board, one that even the brightest students struggled with. "Go ahead," she said, gesturing to Eleanor. The room fell silent, all eyes on her. Eleanor stared at the equation, her mind racing. Memories of her childhood flooded back, the hours spent poring over textbooks, the joy of solving a difficult problem. Slowly, she picked up the chalk and began to write. The students watched in stunned silence as she worked through the problem with ease, her movements confident and precise. When she finished, the room erupted into murmurs. Even Mrs. Peterson looked impressed. "Well," she said, breaking the silence, "it seems we've underestimated you, Mrs. Thompson." Eleanor simply smiled, a sense of pride swelling in her chest. As she left the classroom, she caught sight of Mark Harris, his usual smug expression replaced with awe. For the first time, she felt a glimmer of hope, not just for herself, but for Jacob. Maybe, just maybe, things were about to change. The days that followed Eleanor's unexpected triumph in the classroom became a whirlwind of attention, both positive and negative. News of her calculus-solving prowess spread like wildfire through Willow Creek, turning her into an unlikely local celebrity. At first, it was harmless curiosity, neighbors stopping by to ask how she managed to solve such a complex equation. But soon, the whispers took on a more insidious tone. Some admired her hidden talent, while others dismissed it as a fluke or accused her of showing off. Jacob, on the other hand, found himself caught in a strange limbo. For years, he had been the target of ridicule, but now his classmates looked at him differently, not always kindly. Mark Harris, who had once mocked Eleanor, now seemed oddly fixated on her. He began appearing at the farm uninvited, claiming he wanted to learn from the best. Eleanor tried to brush him off, but Jacob noticed something unsettling about Mark's persistence. One evening, as Eleanor tended to the chickens, Mark approached her again. "Mrs. Thompson," he said, leaning against the fence with a forced smile, "I've been thinking, maybe I could help around here, earn some extra credit for school." Eleanor frowned, setting down the feed bucket. "Extra credit? From whom?" "From you," Mark replied quickly, his voice tinged with desperation. "I need to pass calculus if I want to keep my spot on the football team and, well, everyone says you're a genius." Eleanor crossed her arms, studying him carefully. There was something off about his demeanor, but she couldn't put her finger on it. Still, she felt a pang of sympathy. She knew what it was like to carry expectations, even if they weren't your own. "All right," she said finally, "but don't expect me to do your work for you. You'll have to earn it." Over the next few weeks, Mark became a regular presence at the farm. Eleanor taught him not just calculus, but also patience and perseverance. To her surprise, he proved to be a quick learner, though his motivations remained unclear. Meanwhile, Jacob grew increasingly uneasy. "Mom, why are you helping him?" he asked one night over dinner. "He's the one who made fun of us." "I know," Eleanor replied softly, stirring her soup. "But sometimes people act cruelly because they're scared or lost. If I can help him find his way, maybe he won't feel the need to hurt others anymore." Jacob didn't respond, but his silence spoke volumes. He hated seeing Mark at their home, hated the way his mother seemed to trust him so easily. Yet deep down, he understood her reasoning, even if he didn't agree with it. As Mark's grades improved, so did his reputation. The same students who once teased Jacob now flocked to him, eager to bask in the glow of his newfound success. But beneath the surface, cracks began to form. One afternoon, as Eleanor worked on a particularly challenging problem with Mark, she noticed him glancing nervously at his phone. "What's wrong?" she asked, setting aside her notebook. "Nothing," he muttered, avoiding her gaze. But when she pressed further, he reluctantly admitted the truth. His father, a wealthy businessman, had been pressuring him to succeed at all costs. "He says if I don't get into college, I'm useless," Mark confessed, his voice trembling. "I didn't think I'd make it until you started teaching me." Eleanor listened quietly, her heart aching for the boy. She recognized the weight of impossible expectations, heavy burdens carried silently, much like her own grief after losing her husband. "Mark," she said gently, "you're not defined by your grades or your father's approval. You're capable of so much more than you realize." Her words struck a chord, but they also planted a seed of doubt in Mark's mind. That night, unable to sleep, he scrolled through old messages from his father, each one harsher than the last. Desperation clawed at him, and in a moment of weakness, he made a decision that would change everything. The next morning, Eleanor arrived at school to find chaos erupting in the halls. Students gathered in clusters, whispering furiously. When she entered her son's classroom, she was met with stunned silence. On the board was a familiar equation, one she had solved during her first visit. But this time, someone had scrawled "cheat" across it in bold letters. Mrs. Peterson stood at the front of the room, her expression grim. "Mrs. Thompson," she said, gesturing toward the board, We need to talk." The accusation hung heavy in the air, a cruel twist that Eleanor hadn't anticipated. As she stared at the word cheat scrawled across the board, her mind raced. She had never imagined being accused of something so baseless, especially after proving herself in front of the entire class. Her hands trembled slightly as she turned to Mrs. Peterson, who looked torn between disbelief and duty. "Who did this?" Eleanor asked, her voice steady despite the storm brewing inside her. The students exchanged uneasy glances, but no one spoke. Jacob sat frozen in his seat, his face pale, while Mark lingered near the back of the room, avoiding eye contact altogether. Mrs. Peterson cleared her throat. "Mrs. Thompson, I understand this is upsetting, but we need to address it seriously. If there's any truth to this claim, there isn't," Eleanor interrupted firmly. "I solved that equation on my own, just like I've done every problem you've given me." "I believe you," Mrs. Peterson said, though her tone betrayed hesitation. "But until we find out who wrote this, the school board will require an investigation." Eleanor nodded, swallowing her frustration. She knew how these things worked. Small towns thrived on gossip, and accusations spread faster than wildfire. Still, she refused to let fear dictate her actions. After leaving the classroom, she decided to confront the source of the chaos head-on. That evening, Mark returned to the farm, his usual bravado replaced by guilt-ridden silence. He hesitated at the gate before finally approaching Eleanor, who was stacking firewood. "Mrs. Thompson," he began, his voice barely above a whisper, I didn't mean for this to happen." Eleanor stopped what she was doing, her eyes narrowing. "What exactly happened, Mark? Because right now it looks like someone tried to sabotage everything I've worked for." Mark shifted uncomfortably, his gaze dropping to the ground. "It was me," he admitted, his voice cracking. "I overheard my dad talking about how people like you don't deserve recognition. He said you're just a farmer, not some genius. I got scared, and I thought if I made it look like you cheated, maybe everyone would stop looking up to you." Eleanor felt a pang of sadness, not for herself, but for Mark. His confession revealed the depth of his insecurity and the toxic influence of his father. "Mark," she said gently, placing a hand on his shoulder, "you can't let other people's opinions define you, and you certainly can't destroy someone else's reputation because of your own fears." Tears welled up in Mark's eyes as he nodded. "I'm sorry," he whispered. "I'll tell the truth. I'll fix this." True to his word, Mark confessed to the school the next day, explaining his motives and taking full responsibility for the vandalism. While the admission cleared Eleanor's name, it didn't erase the damage done. Rumors still swirled, and many in the community remained skeptical of her abilities. Some even suggested she had manipulated Mark into lying for her benefit. Determined to reclaim control of the narrative, Eleanor made a bold decision. She approached Mrs. Peterson with a proposal, a public demonstration of her skills, a math challenge open to anyone willing to participate. "If people doubt me," she said, "then let them see for themselves." Mrs. Peterson agreed, impressed by Eleanor's resolve. News of the event spread quickly, drawing crowds from neighboring towns. On the day of the challenge, the school auditorium buzzed with anticipation. Students, teachers, and curious onlookers filled the seats, eager to witness the spectacle. At the center of it all stood Eleanor, calm and composed. She welcomed the audience with a warm smile before presenting a series of increasingly difficult problems. One by one, participants stepped forward to solve them, only to falter under the complexity. When it was Eleanor's turn, she moved with precision, solving each equation effortlessly and explaining her methods in a way that even the most math-phobic spectator could understand. By the end of the demonstration, the room erupted into applause. Even those who had doubted her couldn't deny her brilliance. For the first time, Eleanor allowed herself to feel a sense of validation, not for the accolades, but for the knowledge that she had proven her worth on her own terms. As the crowd dispersed, Jacob approached her, pride shining in his eyes. "Mom," he said, "you were amazing." Eleanor pulled him into a hug, her heart swelling with emotion. Thank you for believing in me, Jacob. That's all I ever needed. The aftermath of Eleanor's public demonstration rippled through Willow Creek like a stone thrown into still water. For weeks, the town buzzed with conversations about her brilliance and resilience. Some residents admitted they had misjudged her, while others remained stubbornly skeptical, clinging to their biases. Yet amidst the mixed reactions, one thing was undeniable. Eleanor had earned respect in a way that no one could take away from her. At home, life began to shift subtly but meaningfully. Jacob noticed a newfound confidence in his mother, a quiet assurance that hadn't been there before. She started taking on small teaching gigs at the local community center, offering free math classes to anyone interested. Her sessions quickly became popular, drawing not just students, but also adults eager to learn or revisit forgotten skills. Among her regular attendees was Mark, who continued to seek her guidance, not out of obligation, but because he genuinely wanted to change. One evening, as Eleanor sat grading papers at the kitchen table, Jacob joined her with a thoughtful expression. "Mom," he said hesitantly, "do you ever feel like maybe all this attention is too much?" Eleanor set down her pen and smiled. "Sometimes, yes. But it's not about the attention, Jacob. It's about showing people that we're more than what they assume. We have value, even if it takes time for others to see it." Jacob nodded slowly, absorbing her words. He had always admired his mother's strength, but now he saw something else in her. A quiet determination to keep pushing forward, no matter the obstacles. Meanwhile, Mark's transformation continued to unfold. His father, furious over his son's confession and subsequent alliance with Eleanor, cut him off financially. Instead of crumbling under the pressure, Mark found solace in hard work. With Eleanor's encouragement, he took a part-time job at the farm, learning the value of labor and perseverance. Over time, their unlikely bond deepened, becoming a testament to the power of forgiveness and second chances. As autumn settled over Willow Creek, painting the fields in hues of gold and crimson, Eleanor organized a special event at the community center, a celebration of learning and growth. The room was filled with laughter, music, and the hum of conversation as people mingled and shared stories. At the center of it all stood Eleanor, beaming with pride as she watched her students, both young and old, engage enthusiastically with one another. Mrs. Peterson approached her during a quiet moment, holding 2 cups of cider. "You've done something remarkable here, Eleanor," she said, handing her a cup. "Not many people would have handled everything the way you did." Eleanor chuckled softly. "I didn't do it alone. I had help. From you, from Jacob, even from Mark. Sometimes we need reminders that we're stronger together." The evening concluded with an impromptu speech from Eleanor, who addressed the crowd with heartfelt gratitude. "When I first walked into that classroom months ago, I never imagined where this journey would lead. All I wanted was to protect my son and prove that intelligence isn't limited to textbooks or classrooms. What I found instead was a community willing to grow, to challenge assumptions, and to embrace change. Thank you for letting me be part of that." Applause erupted, echoing through the hall long after her words faded. As Eleanor stepped down, she felt a profound sense of fulfillment, not because she had proven herself to others, but because she had inspired them to believe in themselves. In the days that followed, Eleanor received letters from parents thanking her for reigniting their children's love for learning. Local businesses offered donations to expand her programs, and even the school board extended an invitation for her to consult on curriculum development. Though she declined the latter, citing her commitment to the farm and the community center, she accepted the former with humility. For Jacob, watching his mother thrive brought a sense of peace he hadn't felt in years. He realized that her journey wasn't just about solving equations, it was about breaking barriers, challenging stereotypes, and proving that brilliance could bloom in the most unexpected places. As winter approached, blanketing the fields in snow, Eleanor stood on her porch once more, gazing at the horizon. Behind her, Jacob joined her, leaning against the railing. "What are you thinking about?" he asked. "The future," she replied simply, "and how far we've come." Call to action. If you enjoyed this story of resilience, intellect, and community, don't forget to like, subscribe, and share it with your friends. Stories like these remind us that greatness can emerge from the simplest beginnings. What did you think of Eleanor's journey? Could you relate to her struggles or triumphs? Let us know in the comments below.